All right, we are live. We are definitely live. What's going on, people? Welcome to the Cigar Chronicles podcast. This is episode 3, and we just gonna simply name this political accountability. Definitely want to give a shout out to BS3 Network and Roku TV and all of the podcast affiliates and their platforms. So, like I said, we're definitely happy and blessed to be on podcast affiliates like Spotify. If you go in iTunes, you'll find us in iTunes. So definitely glad about that. Big ups to our sponsors, Crowns by Trey, Soul Brothers Cigars. We appreciate the love, Soul Brothers, and also Wing Snob. They just got better wings. You know, if you ain't been there, they have really good strips, and the buffalo cauliflower is off the chain. So definitely appreciate our sponsors. Introduction of guests. Once you go and start off, E.
Yes, sir. We'll start with Mr. Jamar Brown. Jamar Brown has over a decade of experience working as a campaign strategist, leadership trainer, and nonprofit leader. Now he is making history as the first ever Black executive director of the Texas Democratic Party. Prior to his role, Jamar served as the director of civic engagement programs at Regarding Power, stewarding partnership with progressive civic engagement and labor groups, and overseeing a portfolio of programs to train and support organizers, campaign managers, and staff, and candidates. Jamar has also served as the national training director for Tom Steyer presidential campaign, where he led a national leadership development program for staff, volunteers, community leaders, and issues advocates. In a previous role as the organizing and training director for Planned Parenthood, Texas Votes, Jamar managed the statewide leadership development, public affairs, grassroots organizing, and issue and electoral campaign work in conjunction with Planned Parenthood affiliates in Texas. Under his leadership, the number of Planned Parenthood supporters across Texas grew by 600,000. Jamar has worked at the local, state, and national level with a range of progressive organizations, training key groups and campaigns across the country, and garnering national coverage, and successfully worked with Color of Change to remove the Confederate flag from South Carolina State House grounds. Raised in Charleston, South Carolina, Jamar earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Clemson University. He most recently served as president of the Black Austin Democrats and on the board of directors for Provide Incorporated and Leadership Austin. Jamar is a member of the Democratic National Committee. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate y'all. Glad to be.
Our next guest, I'm really proud and honored to call this man my brother, Mr. Eddie Armstrong III. Born and raised in North Little Rock, Arkansas. Eddie is the former Democratic member of the Arkansas House of Representatives, representing District 37 from 2013 to 2019. Eddie has earned his BA in political science from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville in 2001 when he served in the State House. His professional experiences including working with the Boys and Girls Club of America in Maryland for Tyson Foods Incorporated as a manager of state and governmental affairs, and for Armstrong and Davis Consulting, where he is partner and CEO. Definitely thank you, Eddie, for joining us on our podcast today, sir.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
We're awaiting one other guest, Cardell Coleman. So I'll move to Mr. Randall Bryant. Randall Bryant, a former chair of the TCBD Dallas chapter, Dallas, Texas, and a well-known, respected political and policy strategist. Through his company, United Marketing, he has worked for over 40 partisan, nonpartisan candidates and bond initiatives on a local and federal level. In 2011, Randall challenged the city of Dallas redistricting process and created his first redistricting map. This experience led him to studying and analyzing various redistricting methods and outcomes to prepare him for a fight in 2021. For this redistricting cycle, Randall found a North Texas municipal redistricting project which aimed to protect, preserve, and produce minority representation in 6 cities and 4 school districts across North Texas. He is appointed to the City Dallas Redistricting Commission and is the redistricting consultant to the Texas Democratic Party. Thank you for attending, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you all for having me, and hello to all the guests as well. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we just gonna jump into it because we definitely have a lot of questions, and we have a lot of people that I already know that definitely can't wait to ask some questions. So my first question is, and you guys could just jump in, whoever wants to jump in first. Has Black politicians been bred to lead, or have we taken steps to lead unapologetically?
I'll jump in as I guess the politician in the room. And Tremont, thank you again, and good brother E, thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Being bred to lead, being bred to be a part of the political confines that we have now in our country, that's a real strong question. I guess the short answer would soon be, if you look across the country, you look at the baby boomers that now occupy the most senior seats of the United States Congress, and even in our state legislators across the country. There is a lack of, a real age mixing there. So dealing with age, and then on top of that, dealing with race, I would soon say that the short answer is probably no, unless you come from a political dynasty or have really been well-versed and acclimated and studied it in school. You don't see a lot of African-American politicians being bred to lead, in my opinion. I think the work that Randall's doing, the good brother's doing, and has done with the redistricting and the efforts that they're doing in marketing is a good step in the right direction on breeding, exposing, and educating our young African-American leaders to get engaged in this system. But it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of realities to what we're faced with now, with given, we've gone through Tea Party, fiscal right, the far right now with Trump conservatives, and then you've got the Democratic Party that's faced a whole bunch of new outlooks on how they can be defined as some call radical left. But we really have to take a step back and look at how we're going to define the party, and then look at how we're going to recruit, engage, and sustain African-American leadership across the country if you're talking about breeding a new generation of people that will even get involved. So I don't think that they're born, nor do I think that to some extent we're breeding a good crop of them right now, but the effort's out there.
Oh, wow.
Sure, I'll jump in. Definitely the answer would be no, in my opinion. Make no bones of saying it, but let me qualify it. And it was spoken about a little bit earlier about redistricting. When you look at just in North Texas alone, the seats of those that occupy them over long periods of time, they were the first of their own. So it wasn't like they were put in a position through a line of succession or a grooming. And of course we only, you only know what you're exposed to. So when you look at that progression of candidates that we had in North Texas over the early 1990s, the two black, we have 3 black Congress members in North Texas with Colin Allred, but both, Congresswoman Johnson and Congressman Vesey were the first of their districts through redistricting. So redistricting is a powerful tool that minorities, black, minorities have benefited from. But that longevity and that succession, it's not created. Most of our, our council districts, those 4 council districts, we've always relied on. The 91 court case created those. So it's never been an institution or a framework where it's taught. So we really can't blame anyone but ourselves. But when we just stop and say, okay, this is where we are, then the next question becomes, how do we change that going forward? So I would say that where we have been and where we are now is definitely a no, but there are so many people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis that are entrenched in figuring out ways how to change that going forward, and the mindset of the next generation, because you look at the baby boomers as you refer to, but then there's a very large gap in the 40 to 50-year-olds in elected office all across the United States. So right now we have pretty much 70 and older that have been there for 20, 30 years. We got 40s and 50s that never had a chance, that really they don't care about it anymore. And then you got 30s and 40s that some got good heads on their shoulders, but other ones just want to be elected for the namesake. And all that is a recipe for disaster at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I'll add to it too. And I think that, y'all bring up a good point, as it relates to what are the vehicles that we're driving this leadership, and how are we driving this leadership development? Randall, you just talked about, how folks are the first, Black elected official. But the thing I think that we have to recognize about politics, there's so many ways that people can serve, right? So there's some people that are in elected office. There are people who are like a lot of us who are strategists, and we do the campaigns and the community outreach and those sorts of things. There's smart people like Randall who figure out maps and representation. There's people who do policy and work in governing bodies and those sorts of things. And so I think that we have to really decide how we have Black people represented and in leadership across all those different vehicles. So, I'm the first Black executive director. It's 2021, right? For the Texas Democratic Party, where we have the highest population of African Americans in the entire country. And so you have to think about the significance that I sit in, right? But the significance of what that means for a state that is a part of Black history and a part of Black politics. And so I think that we have got to be thinking about those vehicles and how we are building vehicles, like the brothers were saying, that are sustainable across multiple generations. It's not something for this generation, but then what is the bridge between this generation and that generation and that generation? One of the first things I remember saying when I took this role and, made the public announcement was, I may be the first Black executive director, but I won't be the last. Mm-hmm. Now it's my responsibility to build systems in the party. So we're building campaign staff training so people can be cultivated. We're doing more management and professional development training in the organization so people can be cultivated, and we're doing those kinds of trainings and those mentorship programs. When folks call me up, I'm sending resumes, literally all the past 2 weeks, been sending resumes. Hey, talk to this Black person, talk to this person, getting people the opportunity so that they can build the real experience that they would need to sit in a seat like this and to drive a vehicle forward in this way. And so I think that that's the piece that we've got to be cognizant of. And then the last piece I'll share, and I'm just going to keep it real because that's what y'all told me. And so the real is we got to not be afraid of the next Black person potentially doing better than us.
Right.
Thing we don't talk about in our community. If Randall and Cardall and all y'all go further than me, then I did my job.
Right.
Each generation should be advancing and building and progressing. You would want the next generation to do better because that means that we have more representation, and then at the end of the day, that representation should turn into power. And power to really move money, move resources, move policy, and do those sorts of things. And so we've got to not be afraid of our fellow Black people doing better than us, because we should be setting it up that way so that future generations to come. Because, I told somebody the other day, they were talking about Black people and not contributing in politics. And I said, a lot of white people who contribute in politics, you're talking about money that's from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. You're talking about money from 1995, right? And so we're centuries behind in some cases as it relates to some of these things. And so we should want the next generation to be better. We have the capital and the access that we need to really build up our community.
That's a great point that you made right there. Reach one, teach one, is what I always say.
Can I capstone that too by saying, and Mr. Coleman, I'm sorry, welcome to the show, man. Sorry to jump in here, but I wanted to just piggyback on something. For example, I ran in a three-way race the first time I ever ran for elected office, went on to be the first African American House Minority Leader since Reconstruction in Arkansas. And when I ran that race, I ran against my peers. They were a bit younger. They were actually considered the Gen Y, I guess, the millennials, and or whatever that means. But as that all started to take a different framework and I backed out of elected politics and got into private business again, the young lady that preceded me in office to your point, Mr. Brown, it was my duty, it was my responsibility to embrace, encourage, and try to promote that millennial coming into this office and give her all the grain that I could in order for her to gain traction. And now on the side that I sit on as a private sector lobbyist for many businesses, she and others are really a key benefactors to how I operate. So you talk about really opening up the opportunity where now I'm able to see wealth in the private sector and take what I utilized in the legislative sector while also embracing a millennial who is making strides in the legislature, along with building coalitions. It really can work. And I think back to your question, Tremont, on if we're breeding a new generation of political leaders, now in lies the opportunity to try and take blueprints like that and implement those in ways that you're building real coalitions, building key relationships, making the private side work while also, being able to engage in the public sector, as you said, Mr. Brown, through policy formation.
Wow. Thank you so much. I want to just take a brief stop right there to introduce our remaining guest, which he really don't need an introduction. He's heavy in the political game, but I will. Cordell Coleman, as deputy chair as the CEC meeting on June 14, 2021. This position will be instrumental as we work to cover as much ground as we can around the county and will be an extension of the chair to increase the DCDP footprint. Cordell was, and please don't, I may be mispronouncing your first name, will be assigned special projects as necessary and will be a close advisor to the chair to ensure inclusion of diverse voices in all we do as the DCDP. To that end, Cordell will be intimately involved in the community council as one of his first assignments. Cordell is a labor organizer working for Texas AFT. He has served as an aide to Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson and Representative Retta Bowers. Served our country as a U.S. Army veteran. We salute you, my brother. Most recently founded a nonprofit providing pro bono legal services to victims of police brutality. Most importantly, Cordell has been a precinct chair for the DCDP and has a strong desire to help unify the party and move Dallas forward in order to win statewide elections and turn Texas blue. Thank you for joining us, Cordell.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Did you want to kind of chime in on the first question, that, which was, has Black politicians been bred to be led, or have we taken steps to lead unapologetically?
I'll pick it back off of what Jamar said. It's 2021, and here I am by the work that you all have done across the state, and just here in Dallas County, that I'm the first Black and the youngest vice chair of the Dallas County Democratic Party in its entire existence. So I think that's, I don't know if that position was bred. I don't think that leadership structure was bred. Dallas County has a number of Black elected officials, and this is something that should have been done long ago. But here we are in 2021, and so I think this is something that we have to advocate for continuously and kind of snatch the mantle.
Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you so much. We're going to kind of shift a little bit with regards to, and we'll start this with Mr. Armstrong. How would you currently grade the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I'm going to say that this is going to be a short answer. And Tremont didn't make this preface, but I've been not as engaged in the front lines of politics, but I would soon give them a middle of the road C+. And that's without paying a lot of major attention on a day-to-day basis, but for what just took place with the $1 trillion package, for what I am currently focused on and remaining hopeful for, that will bump them up to a B, maybe an A, is their actions on the decriminalization and legalization of cannabis. And that's the industry sector in which I'm paying close attention to right now. So without a lot of heartbeat to it, and given the fact that look where we came from to where we are right now with the past administration. And I speak no ill will on any administration because it's still a hard job. Who that president was as a person and how he governed, he got there and he did that. So, kudos to the fact that we've got the first African-American sister in office, and that they're doing a hell of a job against the odds that they were dealt coming into office. And that deserves a lot of credit.
Thank you so much. Mr. Brown.
Well, I was sitting here thinking, because I work for the party.
You ain't caught out. Y'all better be careful.
Look, they pay me to defend the people. And so, I'm going to add on to what Mr. Armstrong was saying. I agree. I was going to add on because I think one of the things that we have to recognize about the Biden-Harris administration, I think the circumstances that they come in was unprecedented with, the pandemic in global history, quite frankly. But I also think that what they're dealing with right now are some real deep systemic issues that, while, yes, we want immediate action, the government is set up to be incremental. And so I think that we're seeing this pull and tug right now of we want change on these things, especially with various generations, people of color, etc. But then, how the Congress goes, how a bill passes and all that and goes. I think there's some fundamental things that they have to work on, though. And I think that as it relates to their electorate. And now we've got to make the connection between the electorate and real policy and seeing some substantial difference. Number one, I think this thing about voting rights and the filibuster, I think is going to be one of the top issues, especially as it relates to Black people, that we're looking at as it relates to our access to the polls, but how our votes count and how we show up. If we had the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and, the federal legislation, the work that Randall was doing around redistricting would have gone a little bit different, across the state. And so a lot of those federal protections would have helped a lot of states that have conservative leaning legislatures who drew the maps. And what people don't understand about the redistricting is you're not only drawing the maps for what your state house and your state senate look like, this could change the trajectory of what the federal government looks like, even on the state level. And not having those federal protections to make sure that there's some fairness and equity in the process is something significant. And I think that also we have to see that not passing that federal voting rights, 95% of our population growth over the past decade was people of color, not a new drawn district. But we don't have those federal protections because of how states are set up. I think number two, as it relates also to Texas, is immigration reform. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about in the broader immigration conversation, Black people are immigrants too. We saw, the pieces that have happened, with Haitian migrants toward the border and those sorts of things. And we have talked about for 50, 60, for decades, what comprehensive immigration reform, particularly look like. But I think a couple things to name is some systemic investments that came through the Build Back Better and the infrastructure. And the number one piece is the broadband. We're talking about roads and bridges, and that's great. That's fine. Because I don't want my car getting dinged up with these potholes. But at the end of the day, you have people who need to start a business, and they can't run their business because they live in rural Texas and they don't have full internet access, right? For example. Or people who need to pay their bills, or people who want to go to college, or what have you. And so I think that there's some systemic things that need to be done. But I also think that how are we going to navigate and move forward on the deep systemic things that have built over decades and centuries with an electorate that wants immediate action, but a government system that calls for incremental action. And so I think that that's the conflict that we're going to continue to see. Now, how does that show up in 2022 in terms of the midterms? I think we're going to have to see over the next few months some of the things that happen and how that might play to the communities that the Democratic Party would need to be our coalition.
Good deal. Mr. Bryant.
Trying to gather myself.
We didn't need you to exhale, man. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. Well, because beyond, if you just say how, what's their grade? Well, what are we grading them against? Black people don't have an agenda, so we can't grade them against that. And until we codify and solidify what it is that we want the federal government as a whole to do and get behind that, then what can we ever grade them against? we might throw one thing out here and there. You know, we might say reparations one time, or we might we might say, you know, but until we come up with our own agenda that's rooted in fundamental policy changes, then, you know, we'll get the feel good measures every so often. But as a whole, those policies really don't affect, you know, the day-to-day lives that we live. So, you know, as far as what they went there to do, I mean, you got to give them an A, as far as I'm concerned. But you know, when you want to step back away from that and say, is that really affecting the change of Black people's lives? Well, you might look somewhere different.
That's fair. That's fair. Mr. Coleman.
I'm gonna go in a different direction here.
Come on.
And the reason I say that is, you know, we were in deep water, man, just a year ago this time. And so if we're grading them based on what the type of situation that they inherited, this administration, and dealing with COVID-19 and Biden-Harris administration response to COVID-19 has been exactly what this country has needed. I'm not a Biden-Harris surrogate. I'm just keeping it real. You know, Trump, you know, it was unseen the amount of people that he let die on his watch, no matter the age. Even here in Texas, where our lieutenant governor was willing to serve up, you know, our senior citizens, and Abbott and Trump serving up our children and not putting masks on kids as they go back to school. I think the Biden administration has really shown true leadership in how they handled COVID-19, which disproportionately affected Black people and communities of color because we didn't have the appropriate resources for adequate resources to health in the beginning. So I think that their response to COVID-19 to me was really saved them and giving them that high letter grade from me.
That's fair. Thank you, gentlemen. Tremont, I'll turn it over to you, Tremont.
Well, I was just going to piggyback on that as well. Like I said, you know, I'm definitely kind of in the mid ground. You know, I say C. You know, I think Randall brought up a good point. You know, it's almost like, you know, how can, you know, what are we supposed to grade them on, especially if we don't have an agenda? You know, and we always, you know, make the fuss, you know, hey, what they do for Black folk. I mean, you know, we're not coming to the table with a specific agenda of things that we need, you know, and things that we're looking for, you know. So, you know, and they're also, you know, cleaning up some mess that was put in front of them, you know, from the last administration. So, you know, definitely, you know, I give them a C. You know, it's still early in the administration, so it's still a lot of work to do. So, you know, we'll just see in the upcoming months and the upcoming year what they're going to do as far as just with making us a better USA. So I'm gonna jump to I'm kind of jump around. In you guys' opinion, has race relations heightened, or is it just brought more so to the spotlight now? Anybody can jump in on that one.
Well,
Go ahead, Jamar.
I'll jump in. I'm just going to go ahead and say the thing, call a spade, as they say. I mean, the country was built on race. And so I think that that's the thing that we've got to talk about. So I don't think there's an elevation. I think that we're having more conversation about it, but there's more conversation on two ends, right? There's people who want to maintain white supremacy and they're hanging on to it. And there's people who want to dismantle those sorts of systems and bring more diversity and more equity and racial justice, you know, in our communities across the country. And so I think that that's what we're seeing here. And then what we're seeing, especially in elections, you know, over the past, you know, decade or maybe 15 years, especially with President Obama running, but also especially with Donald Trump running. And then what we're seeing now to critical race theory and how that's being used against candidates. And so I definitely think that there's some, you know, definite things that race is showing up and being elevated, but there are some people who are using race to maintain power. And I think that is the piece that we've got to understand, and that's the piece that we've got to navigate. And so when, the new Republican governor of Virginia goes around the state and tells people that they're trying to, talk about Black and brown issues in our textbooks, and they want, to emphasize that, racism is a thing, and then you go and you tell voters to vote against that, right? And so we're now in public schools where children are supposed to learn how to think critically. We're sussing and analyzing what information that they're even given to be able to think critically. And this is going to be another generation of people who then get into office and they have those mindsets and they're not able to analyze critically because they don't have all the information in front of them. And so that's what I think we're seeing. And so I think it's heightened on two fronts, especially, but we always have to remember the country was built on race. And it's going to take generations before we really see a major difference because of just how I believe we're going backwards, where they're using critical race theory and critical race theory bans, and they're doing all these different things to almost take away the race piece without us acknowledging our history. And so I don't know if it's just, particularly like, people elevating race. I think it's a matter of utilizing race to maintain power. And I think that's how we should define it.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, Jamar. And, Republicans, there's an old saying in politics, they say Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love. And so when we're talking about how do we create the messaging, around, our, the strategies as far as the November elections and whatnot, Republicans are very good at making things very plain. And one could say that, the voters aren't too educated, so they have to. But it works. Right. They can take something that we will make so complex and create so many bullet points and data points, and right. They'll just dumb it down. They'll just say CRT. Most people most people say, well, we don't even know what CRT means. They don't even know what CRT stands for, like the actual acronym, right? For them, it doesn't matter though, right? So they are good at taking some of the most complex scenarios and just making them so plain. And it's like, well, what's more valuable, the win or being right? Right. And that is where we miss the boat. We're so concerned on framing narratives in a way that makes, the most a dissertation style of being right versus framing it in a way that appeals to the voters. One thing Democrats never talk about is the economy. We never talk about how our pocketbooks are going to be affected, right? I know we're getting off a little bit on race, but it ties back to it when we're talking about how we talk to our people, right? How we frame these national narratives that are going on that we see on TV every day, but then explain them to our people in a way that they can understand them to then be able to fight back as well. But to answer the point, the question more directly, I definitely agree with Jamar. I don't think race has changed one bit since day one, since we've come here at least. Maybe before 1619, it might have been a different story, but ever since we've been here, America's been the same.
He's dropping some nuggets. Let's be real. Race is economics. And so I would say, Tremont, to your question, we're in a time now where, Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the push between our Asian brothers and sisters. Let's not forget about the Aborigines and our Indian brothers and sisters who had all of this before we were colonized here. You date it back and now you think about buzzwords like social equity and race theory and how that is now being used as a political policy coin. To Mr. Brown's point, it's economics behind that as well, and we cannot forget that. So for the six brothers on this chat this afternoon, when we think about are we going forwards or backwards, I put the responsibility on us to, either get down or lay down. And I think all of us are about getting down. So maximizing on the areas that we're all fluent in politics or otherwise with this race conversation and making certain that it benefits people that look like us is the real challenge and call to action, whether it's the Democratic Party, the National Party. I mean, things have gone awry. And To Brother Randall's point earlier, it seems as though they do, as Republicans, take a lot of bullet points and use a lot of fear factors in those bullet points whenever needed, the war on drugs or whatever you have it. And that's economics for them. But it's unplanned. As you've seen, some of it is unpopular where people will hold their nose and still go to the polls and vote for it. And it is up to us, Democrats, Black men, to find ways to get into the understanding that race is economics and it ain't going nowhere. It's definitely heightened. Now, how do we, plan, plot, and strategize to make it benefit us in a stronger way?
Mm-hmm. Cortez, you want to comment on that?
I wouldn't add anything that I've already heard and don't agree with, man. These brothers have already covered it. This is something that I do want to specifically see the administration be stronger on, right? I remember just like yesterday when Biden was in South Carolina with Jim Clyburn, and Jim Clyburn stood before us and said, "We know Joe and Joe knows us," right? Mm-hmm. And I took it in that moment that we would see a little bit difference as it relates to race relations specifically for Black folks, and we haven't seen that. And so I'm still waiting on that to happen.
Can I add something? I know we got to move on, but I really want to add this because it's sitting in my spirit.
It's in his spirit. You got to let that man say it now.
We like to take the moral high ground. And I'm not saying we should be immoral people. That's not what I'm saying. Right. But sometimes we lose power taking the moral high ground because we see the clear tactics. We see the clear messaging. Like Randall said, they make it so simple that even the people who vote for that think that they're smart. And they're not. But they think they are because it is so simple. And we go in, we do this moral high ground. And the Republicans, Dan Patrick went on national TV and said, Texas can't move out of COVID because Black people won't get vaccinated, right? And we had a really big response to that, in the party. We put a few folks on MSNBC and other places, to talk about it. The party, the Texas Democratic Party, we've been very vocal in calling Greg Abbott racist as some of the things that we do. And you'll be surprised that people are like, well, y'all shouldn't talk about race. And as Democrats, especially Democrats relying on a coalition of people that are impacted by race, right, we have to do a better job of calling the thing a thing and really talking about issues and plights of different communities. And so when you see the Texas Democratic Party and other Democratic entities outright calling people racist, we need to be putting that forward and really challenging the electorate of, is this who we really are, right? And being able to do that and not taking the moral high ground to not respond to it, but understanding in morality, we need to respond to it because it's showing up in policy decisions and in our government. And so I think that we've also got to do more of that work, knowing that we need Black and brown people to flip this state.
Oh, that's the perfect segue. I'm glad we let you add on to that, Mr. Brown, because we're gonna dive right on into to what you're kind of talking about. And in your guys' opinion, how do we turn some of these big population states like Texas and Florida blue?
Carl, you want to go first? We were gonna kind of put you last a couple times.
You know what? I was hoping that our state executive director would jump in on that.
Build them up.
Well, I'm a little Southern Arkansas boy, and we've got a ways to go. I've got a par with you gentlemen this evening, so I'm going to say good evening. But given the recent redistricting lines and what we're looking like over the next 10 years, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that must be done. And understanding the climate of these supermajorities is critical. Right. And I think not being such an adversary and trying to identify ways to be a part of the future redistricting is the only way we get there. And in a place like Texas, y'all the last to go, but the biggest to do it. So, no, I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with down there. And, but we got a ways to go. You guys have a good evening. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Armstrong. Have a good one. Carla, if you want to go ahead and start on that, you're welcome. You're welcome to do so.
Yeah, just from a hyper local lens, and one thing that I really picked up on that I love to hear Bishop William Barber say is that we have to listen to the stories of impacted people, right? And as we work on issue-based campaigns and talk about the real issues that are affecting impacted people every day in Texas, I saw him come to Texas a few months ago and build a real coalition of folks, him and Beto O'Rourke, a number of other folks around voting rights, and he had some of everybody there, veterans, you name it. And so as we work on issues and listen to impacted people, I think that's when you see real progress. Turning Texas blue is this lofty term that we've kind of fallen in love with for the politicos and people who are really into politics, but we're not going to really move the needle until we deal with the issues that are affecting impacted people. And I think that's one thing that we have to do better as a local party and as a national party as well.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Bryant?
Yeah, I want to definitely go first. I want to build up. I want to build up Jamar to bring it home for us. So I think two things. If we're looking at turning Texas blue in 2022, two things, and then one more maybe on the realistically long term. First thing is, in my opinion, I think we should make a concerted effort to put one African American, one Hispanic, and one Anglo at the top of the ticket, some kind of way. Now we've already started identifying candidates in different fields, so there's a few outstanding. I think that if looking a little bit further into that strategy, if you send the African American candidate to Dallas and Harris, maximize those 2 votes. Send the Hispanic candidate down in the valley, maximize that vote, and then Beto ain't got no problem going 254 counties anyway. So I mean that works.
Right.
But I think people want to, we fight so much for ourselves, but then when we don't see ourselves on the ticket, that reduces the turnout. So in my strongest opinion, I think that will be key. And so you got to have good primary candidates, right? Because we can't just anoint any person to November, right? So we got to get some good minority candidates to fill these other 2 positions. Second thing, and I don't have a problem saying this, I've said it on some public spaces before too. I think safe Democrats in these seats across the state have to work the top of the ticket as well. Safe Democrats, by and large, historically, unless the top of the ticket for some major event is coming to town, you don't see them in November. And so, we have, I believe, last time I checked, 5 congressmen and women, 17 state reps, and 2 senators. And then so that's for the 2022 challenge. And then we also got 52 black mayors across the state as well. Now, long term goes back to the work that Jamar believed in when I brought this program to the Texas Democratic Party, but redistricting. Because when we go back to this pipeline that we talked about in the very first question, we have to start building not only grassroots in our organizing efforts, but bottom up in our political structure as well. So when you're talking about how do we move from city councils to county commissioners, that county commissioner running for railroad commissioner or statewide office, right? So we have to start building that infrastructure out, going back to redistricting more importantly, because that gives us the seats. We know that in majority minority cities that 65% of those majority minority cities, we only occupy 35% of the seats. In cities that are majority minority populated. Right. But in at-large systems, cities that still maintain those at-large systems, we only occupy 10% of those seats, right? So this redistricting process, people got to really wake up. It's not just voting, and that's why they only do it every 10 years, not because of the census. It's because they want to just keep it so far removed from the front of your minds that it's always some reoccurring new, new thing to you, And so building up this pipeline where we have so many, because you think about it, when you look at who's really advocating, and a lot of times, it's local people, because they are using it as some type of tool or a stepping stone to advocate for them to elevate themselves for higher office. So we get that, right? So they're saying, they're supporting the top of the ticket, council members or school board trustees, but they're doing the work, and by and large, doing the work sometimes more often than these other public elected officials that are on the November ballot themselves, but either running unopposed or they know that the Republican candidate can't beat them. So we need, the entire body of elected officials across the state, safe or not, advocating in November, and we need people that look like the broad coalition of Texas Democrats at the top of the ticket.
Bring it on home, Brown. Bring it home, Brown.
I guess it's my turn. Okay, well, let me take us a step back, if I may. Because the question was, turn Texas blue. We have to really define what that means. And number one. Number two, we have to decide what is the actual goal here? Is the goal to win one election and the state is blue? Or are we winning across the state and showing power? And so to me, I think that we have to challenge ourselves as political folks and folks in leadership that turning Texas blue is not the goal. Earning governing power is the goal, right? Because it's one thing to win an election. You've got to maintain power. And that is, we do this, we do these one-hit wonders, right? We win an election, everybody all excited. Let's go back to 2008, right? We made history, and then boom, Congress flips. The next time, the obstruction continues to happen, right? And so turn Texas blue, it sounds wonderful, right? To donors, I talk to them all the time. It sounds wonderful to people in the political class, but we've got to start talking about this in a way that we are earning governing power in this state to really make a difference in the lives of people that we are expecting to turn out in coalition. So I think we've got to be better about defining our goal, because turning Texas blue isn't how you go to the HBCU and get them to vote, right? Talking about how we can get more state funding to these HBCUs. It was Democratic legislators for multiple cycles or multiple legislative sessions that got almost $1 million for almost every HBCU in the state, right? And we have to start talking about how we're doing that type of work, for example. I think number two, to Randall's point about candidates, I think it's something that's very important in making sure that we are building a bench across the state. Why I was so invested in the work that Randall and so many others do is when we put people on county commissions, courts across the state, when we put people on city council, when we elect county judges or district attorneys, et cetera, across the state, those are people that can run for office later at higher levels because they're going to have some political and some governing experience to bring to the table. And part of that political experience, why we have challenges with Black and brown candidates, is this. We talked about earlier, race and economics, right? That with white candidates, either they have their own money or they have access to people who can give them money very quickly. Black and brown people do not always have those financial resources to mount a statewide campaign. Texas is the size of 6 states, right? It's, I'm from South Carolina. We're not South Carolina or a small state. And so it takes millions of dollars, right, to win. And if we have not cultivated people's leadership and political engagement, then we end up in situations where it is challenging to find people to run, at the statewide level, like Randall was saying. And so I think that's deeper work for not only 2022, but that is long-term, we're talking about 30-year work, that we have to be doing. I think that we have to get our engagement. So one of the things that we've been cognizant as I came into this role is to really make sure that we're working on the county and the precinct level. And our precincts matter because those are the people that are in our communities talking to people every single day. And when we don't listen to our precinct chairs, we don't take their advice, we miss out on what does Mary Sue down the road think about X issue, right? Because, we're doing all this polling and, we think we're smarter than everybody. And so I think that down, on the ground engagement and doing it early, not showing up in August and September. That's why we're active at the party and working with our county chairs now to do engagement. And so, y'all are most of y'all in Dallas, North Texas area, right? Where y'all are working and meeting and doing listening sessions across your county, right? And it's those sorts of things that we have to continue to cultivate and continue to encourage. I think that one of the pieces that we don't talk about, as the Democratic Party, we rely on a diverse coalition. We have to have voter protection as part of our work.
Right.
We need the poll workers, the election judges, people sitting on the ballot boards, and we need VDRs, people who need to get trained in the system. You can run the best campaign, but if you don't know how to navigate the system, that when people show up to vote and what they're supposed to experience, to make sure that, one, they're able to vote safely, and two, that their vote count, we've done a disservice to all the organizing that we do, right? And so we have the numbers in this state to be able to turn this state, but we've got to be able to have the messaging and be able to motivate people to be able to do that. Now, I'll say this piece about messaging because, it's the new word. Everybody's used this word now. And I think that we have to make sure that, there's some science to it, but there's got to be some people to this. And so in this cycle, our communications and messaging team has been doing focus groups across the state because we want our message to also be people and voter informed, right? So that when we meet with people, I'm going to Lubbock in January to meet with a group of folks. San Angelo, we're going across the state to go talk to people. We were in Laredo a few weeks ago. We're going out to East Texas soon. And part of that work in the party is going to the people and just asking them, what do you care about, right? And messaging doesn't have to be this whole scientific polling. Some of that's great and wonderful. We do some of that to test our work. But sometimes you got to go to people and just ask them, right? And be able to go and say, I've talked to labor workers. I've talked to healthcare workers. I've talked to small business owners. I've talked to teachers. I've talked to parents and students, et cetera, across the state. And so I think that we've got to go back to those organizing basics, as part of this work, because we've really got to get on the ground to be able to do that. Now, in addition, as we talk to Black people, how are we organizing our fraternities and sororities? How will we work with our Black organizations, Urban League, NAACP, right? How are we going into barbershops? We're going into beauty salons. I tell the story all the time. I didn't get registered to vote at some fancy voter drive. My barber he's a voter, right? My barber was like, sit down. When I graduated high school, turned 18, he said, sit down in the chair, get your hair cut. I got my hair cut. And he said, here, make sure you register to vote. I registered to vote in my barbershop. We've got to be able to go back and empower our community leaders. We already got the community leaders. Now we need to get the resources and the information, right? Because like my barber doesn't follow redistricting, but he is a platform in the Black community. And so how do we get to him to get the information about voting and redistricting and politics so that every client that comes in, he's touching, right? And or the beauty salons, the same thing. You have barbers, they see 20, 30 people a day. That's 20. And when you add that up every day through an election, that's a community of Black people, right? That we're working to educate, engage, and motivate and turn out to the polls. And so it's a lot of that work that's happening, but a lot of that work still has to be done at a higher magnitude for the size of the state. And so I think those are a couple steps. There's a ton more, but we only have so much time. That we can be taking, in order to do that. But I don't ever say turn Texas blue, not because I don't believe that we should turn the state blue. I understand that we have to change the state for the governing power to do what we need to do for people who have been suffering, people who do deserve better in the state.
Wow, that's a nugget right there. And that's a good point. That's a good point that you brought up about that, because Mr. Coleman's, what he's doing right now with the community council, I was able to sit on a couple of those Zoom calls, and I think that's exactly to your point as far as getting the community involved, letting them know that what your number one, your vote matters, and number two, giving them the tools that they need to be able to make some conscious decision when they do go vote. So I think that's something that's going to be real powerful down the road. What you're doing with this community council, Cordell.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in too, E. And I know that this is not the most popular thing to say, but we as Black folk, especially the ones that are already holding these elected offices, they don't have succession plans. I mean, you have people that's been in these seats for 20, 30 years, and you would think that they would be molding someone to pass the baton to. But instead, we'll just, be in a position where, they say they're not running or anything, and we scrambling, and now you have everybody fighting against each other trying to get in this seat instead of us having a strategic plan of, okay, this person is going to run, and we definitely molding them because the other side does it all the time. It's just like we don't have that mentality to have succession plan for people in these positions that's going to govern us, and that I don't understand for the life of me, and that's just me. Well, I know it's not just me, but I'll say it.
Oh yeah, that's true. That is so true. Oh wow. Well, I tell you, man, y'all have been given some golden nuggets, man, as far as what needs to be done, to get these get folks out to vote and express the importance of what it's going to require for us to change the dynamic for this state. I guess we'll kind of shift a little bit as far as we're gonna give you either a word or a phrase and tell me what the first thing that comes to your mind. And I'll start right now. I'll address this first to Mr. Bryan. Reparations.
Not gonna happen. First thing come to my mind.
Okay. Jamar.
I would support it, but I don't see it happening.
Mr. Brown.
Necessary, but definitely a challenge.
Mr. Coleman.
I think it's attainable.
It's attainable?
It's attainable.
That's a good one. What about you, Jamar?
Well, it depends on how the reparations would be.
So that ain't the first thing that came to mind. That's my thoughts.
That's a butt.
Yeah, because this is the thing, and Dave Chappelle had put it very eloquently. If we were to get funds, Cadillac would be the most popular and most, give me my 40 acres and a mule. But I really don't see it happening. But it's definitely nice to think about.
I agree. The census redistricting. Let's start with Mr. Brown.
Racist.
Wow. Wow.
Especially in Texas, it was very racist. 95% people of color. Growth in the state, white people still hold the majority, and the party, another party holds the majority, and they did not draw any new minority access districts.
That's on any level.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Mr. Bryant.
When I think of census and redistricting, I think that as far as redistricting goes, redistricting, I've said this plenty of times, it's the most powerful political process to the overall political system.
Mr. Coleman.
Fumbled. I think we missed a big opportunity with COVID-19. I know that was kind of used as a scapegoat or a reason as to why we didn't really touch as many people as we should, or reach as many people as we should. But the undercount was real, and I know that the numbers really are there. But we could have done a lot better, specifically here in North Texas, to reach real folks, and we fumbled the opportunity.
And y'all know this is my wheelhouse, so I got to give them a little bit more nuggets on this one. Maybe they might not be nuggets if y'all feel like, but a little bit more points.
And
so remember now, when we did the census, let's go back to the census, right? When we did the census, remember we had a president that was threatening a citizenship question, right? Mm-hmm. We had COVID. We had Texas cities that have historically been funded by the state to do the census work that the state cut all the funding away from them. That was before the president and COVID hit. They already knew that in that biennial budget that the money wasn't going to be there. And then you already have what they call hard to count census tracts in particularly Black and brown neighborhoods where it's high transit, multifamily unit properties of people, right? So we will have the odds stacked up against us. And I remember sitting on the census committee for the city of Dallas at the time, and they were talking about like, it's $2,135 for every person we missed, and tens of millions of dollars across state. How much we just need all these people. We got to get the count right. We're up against all these odds. And as Jamar pointed out, minorities delivered this state 95% of the growth across the state, and the thanks that we were given with those maps, it's just a crying shame.
And Randall, and then also add in they messed up the mail, the postal service.
Right. So when we were saying send your forms in, and who knows where half of those forms were and how they happened to get lost, with the delivery. And so, especially for people like, a lot of our families who were like, okay, let me sign and mail and keep it moving. And it was weeks. And some of those forms may have never shown up, who knows? And so I think that was a real challenge as well. Yep.
Wow. Well, I'm telling you, that's crazy. Go ahead. Come on, you want to go ahead and close this out? I'm kind of tongue tied now. Y'all are on it, man.
God, look here. I'm just gonna give. I definitely thank everyone for coming on. I definitely know that you guys could have been doing anything else with your time, but like I said, you was able to bless us with your knowledge, especially on these topics that we were speaking of. I'm definitely give you a chance to make some final closing words and tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Sure, I'll go first. Again, Tremont and Miss Tilly, thank you, number one, for the invitation. But more importantly, the hard work that you all are doing day in, day out as a member of North Texas. I see it. Definitely appreciate it. It's definitely something that we see for the guests. I'll just speak on behalf of us. I know we see the hard work that you all do, so definitely appreciate that. And this venue for allowing us to be there. Again, directly as far as the work that I'm doing with North Texas redistricting, you can reach me via my website. The easiest place to go to is www.ntmrp.com, North Texas Municipal Redistricting Project. Those 6 cities and 4 school districts are Dallas, Fort Worth, Garland, Grand Prairie, Irving, and Mesquite. And the school districts are the Dallas ISD, Fort Worth ISD, Grand Prairie ISD, and Irving ISD. We might have missed the mark with the ability to influence our state redistricting. But remember, municipal redistricting is going to go on for a long time. I'm on the City of Dallas Commission. We're not expected to finally approve our plans until sometime in May. So we have a long road ahead of us to really make some change. So we don't have to drive all the way to Austin, right? You just got to show up to, your local city and your local school district. And there are people that that you see, and you can get in contact with on a day-to-day basis. Their offices are definitely open. So I encourage everyone to get educated on redistricting and get involved, testify, submit written testimony. If you can get down and put it on the record, do so, because that record, a lot of times people think, well, let's just let the maps pass and then we'll just sue them. But we have no foundation. We have nothing that shows a court where we've at least submitted where the community says this is what we want as a community. The court's just going to say you're just crying over sour grapes, that you had an opportunity to influence whether we knew we could get anything done or not. But get involved with redistricting at any chance that you can. And if you live in those municipalities, definitely reach out to me. I'll definitely try to be of assistance to you.
Mr. Coleman?
I'll leave you with this. In our last election cycle, 2020, there were 300,000 Democratic voters in Dallas County that did not vote, just didn't come out. And so what I'll be doing over the next year is focusing on those folks specifically. So back to what Jamar said about getting with everyday folks, man, your barber, individuals who you have constant contact with every day, and thinking of those creative ways to be involved in the political process. If you're watching this podcast right now and you're not a registered voter or active voter, if you say, hey, man, I'm not really involved in politics like that, I'd like to have the conversations with you and show you how politics affects your everyday life. And we can stay connected via social media. My handles are @Cardall Coleman, first name and last name on all platforms. And I'd love to show you how the democratic process can work for you.
And I'm going to wrap up and just give 2 words. I'm going to keep it simple. Do something. It's action, right? And there's different types of things, right? There are people who register people. Make sure you're registered. Make sure your friends and family, church members, whoever you're in your circle, in your space of influence. But we have to contact voters, right? We're in candidate filing period. Run for precinct chair, right? Talk to, Cardall, for example, about, doing something, of that nature. That's the baseline of our grassroots organizing in the Democratic Party. It should be, right? And that we're, building that work, as it relates, right? We support people running for office. If you're able to support financially, support organizations that are doing this work. I would love to go across Texas, and every day I get a call about a new idea. I'm like, I wish it all was free. Because the next question is, where are we going to get the money, right? And, and a lot of fundraising goes into these pieces. And so, when you give your $10 a month, your $20 a month, your $50 a month, it goes a long way in touching a few people in different communities across the state. And so I don't want to say do something that sounds flippant, but I mean, if all of us really do something and move forward in our communities and move toward this goal of changing the state, I think that we're going to see, better results, but we're going to see more engaged people. Now, the other piece I think that we have to be mindful of doing something is not just to do the one thing, right, and go home, right? We've got to make sure that this work is consistent, which is why earlier in the program, we talked about building other people, right? Because we're human, right? And we have to sustain this work and sustain this program through other people. So I can't just organize my precinct for 20 years by myself. At some point, I need to be training and cultivating somebody else, whether they serve as the precinct chair or not, but that they add capacity to the work that you're doing in your community. So also be mindful of bringing other people along with you and learning together so that you don't feel alone, right? That you don't feel in a corner and those sorts of things. And so those are some of the things that I would encourage folks, that are listening to do. And you can follow me. I'm Jamar Brown everywhere. So if you and then obviously our website, always go to Texas Democrats. We have everything up there. We have press messaging. You can get on our press list to see how we're messaging on issues. You can learn how to run for office, and so there are lots of different things that you can learn on our website as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And to your point where you said do something, we already have planned on Monday to be at the Dallas DPS. So we're going to be registering folks to vote. So
all right.
Awesome. Registered to vote Monday between 9 and 1. We'll be at the Dallas DPS office trying to get folks that aren't registered to vote. So thank you for that.
Good.
We plan to do the work. We plan to do the work. So you want to take us out, Jamar?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback a little bit off what you just said too. This last election cycle, in a 3-month span, me, Ernest, and we actually had a crew of people. We got over 4,000 people registered to vote in the 3-month time span, and we looking to triple that. And also, on the flip side of that, we're making sure we get their tails to the actually polling sites too, because it doesn't help to get people registered to vote if they're not going to get out and go vote. So we're definitely going to start Monday, start that whole process again. We're going to make sure we trickle down those numbers that Cardall had mentioned, of people that were unregistered to vote. We're going we're gonna do our part and definitely gonna do what we can. Always say as the mantra says is iron sharpens iron. So definitely glad that it's some brothers on here that definitely want to make a change, and we gonna make a change. If you don't give us the mantle and the baton, we gonna take it. So we gonna do the work, and definitely, like I said, humbled and thank you guys for showing and giving your insight on everything that we talked about. Definitely we appreciate it. Yeah. So thank you guys again. And definitely come on anytime. We're doing this podcast every Wednesday. We definitely have a nice following, and we definitely are getting picked up, by podcast streaming outlets. So we're definitely appreciative of this avenue and of this platform. So we definitely appreciate it. Appreciate BS3 Network as well as Roku TV, Wing Snob. We definitely thank you guys for coming on. So until next Wednesday, we'll holler at you.
Have a good evening. Thank you, back. Thank y'all.
Take care.
All right.